Chapter 2. "We're going to be dancing," Bryn said as she stood under Ramsay's arm next to the table. "So why don't you get in first?" The tips of Lisa's ears flamed, but she didn't want to make a complete scene, so she slid a hand under her straight, light beige skirt and slipped into the booth. Elbow Guy slid all the way around until he was sitting by pullover shirt, and in the next instant, Lisa was so close to him, she could feel the heat from his shoulder. Carefully, she wound the strand of hair around her ear as she smiled over at him sheepishly. At that moment, Haley bumped into her and nearly sent her careening right into him. "So, Rams, are you going to introduce us to your friends?" Pullover shirt guy asked. "Oh, sure," Ramsay said smoothly. "This is Chandra, and Bryn, and the bride-to-be Haley, and—" His gaze chanced on Lisa and stopped as though he wasn't quite sure where she had come from. "Lisa," she said so quietly it was drowned out by the music. Ramsay nodded, although she was sure he just wanted to get on with the introductions. "And over here we've got Eve and Dustin and Jeff." He looked around as the name wound right into the middle of Lisa. Jeff. Jeff. It was a nice name, ordinary, just like he looked, ordinary in an unbelievably extraordinary way. "Where are Craig and Bridget?" "Dancing, I think," Eve said, looking out to the floor. "Well, then, what are we all sitting here for?" Ramsay asked in annoyance. "Ladies." One by one they slid back out of the booth, and Lisa slid over 2 inches, wishing there was more oxygen in the room. When Haley was out, she looked back. "Lise?" It was a trap. Either way, it was a trap. "I think I'll just stay here." With an annoyed shrug, Haley followed the group into the crowd. A second, and then 2, and suddenly Lisa wished she had followed her sister. "So, a bachelorette party, huh?" the guy she was pretty sure was Dustin asked. "Yeah, Haley's getting married next week," Lisa said, clearing her throat to get the whole sentence out. "Ugh, I remember that," Eve said. "Horrible, horrible, horrendous week." She laid a hand on Dustin's, and he looked down at her. "I'm glad that's over." "What's over?" a blonde asked as she slid into the booth next to Lisa, and then she stopped for a second when she realized she didn't know who that was. "The wedding," Eve said theatrically, as the guy with the blonde sat down next to her, leaving precious little space between Lisa and Jeff. Why couldn't she even think that name without her heart slamming in her chest? She had to get it together before they all figured out she was an idiot. "Oh," the blonde glanced at Lisa with curiosity mixed with confusion. "Guys," Dustin said, "this is, Lisa, wasn't it?" Wishing there was a non-threatening place to put her gaze, Lisa nodded. Instantly, the new guy held his hand across the table. "Craig," he said gallantly, "and this is my wife, Bridget." Lisa shook the other 2 hands as her senses wrapped around the fact that although he was inches away from her, Jeff hadn't so much as said a word in 10 minutes. "You know," Bridget looked at her watch, "we really better be getting home. The babysitter's going to fire us." "Wouldn't want that, would we?" Eve asked sweetly as she huddled closer to Dustin. "You all take care." Craig extended his hand first to Dustin and then to Jeff, and when Jeff extended his hand, Lisa's senses snapped to a full understanding of the size of his forearm. It made at least 2 of hers, and it was 4 shades tanner than hers as well. Then Craig waved at her. "It was nice to meet you, Lisa." "Yeah, you too," she said, willing rational to come back to her. "Night," the departing 2 said, and Dustin waved at them. For a moment, the music simply surrounded them, and then Dustin looked down at Eve. "You do realize we're wasting good music here?" "Wouldn't want that now, would we?" she replied. Hand in hand, they slipped out, and just before they walked off, Dustin turned and pointed at Jeff. "You behave yourself." There wasn't a single inch of space anywhere on Lisa's face that wasn't 57 degrees hotter than it should have been. Slowly, hoping he wouldn't notice, she slid an inch and then another away from him. It wasn't the direction she wanted to go, but for her heart's sake, if nothing else, it was the direction she had to. A moment, and then another, and she was starting to think this would be the longest night of her life. The edge of her finger wrapped around the hair at her temple and pushed it behind her ear as she glanced over at him. He wasn't looking at her. Instead, his gaze was transfixed on the dance floor. "So, you never said what it is you're celebrating," she said softly, hoping he might actually talk again. In the next heartbeat, his gaze caught hers, and she saw the apprehension in the depths of his eyes. He smiled, kind of. "Oh, we graduated today." "Graduated? From what?" She laid her temple onto her hand as she looked at him. "The Fire Academy," he said, nodding. "Fire Academy?" Then she understood. "Oh, so you're a fireman too." He nodded as the bottom of his lip disappeared under his teeth. "All four of you?" she asked to clarify. "Yeah, but after tonight we're kind of going our separate ways, so—" She smiled at him with gentle understanding. "That's tough. I guess you get pretty close working together like that." The glance over at her held only gratefulness. "Yeah." His gaze fell back to the table, and he sat for a moment, lost in thought. "It's weird, you know. A year ago I didn't even know them, and now it's like saying goodbye to brothers." "Are they, like, leaving for good?" "Ramsey's going to College Station, and Dustin's going to South Houston. I'm not real sure where Craig will get stationed. Probably somewhere around here, but who knows?" The list stopped. She waited, but plans for the fourth person didn't come. "What about you?" His glance snapped up to her, and then drifted back out to the dance floor. "I've got an interview on Monday, downtown." "Oh, really? Huh. I work downtown." The shift of subject brought his gaze back to her. "Oh, where do you work?" Instantly, it was her gaze that was running. "Oh, it's just a little office in the Travis Tower." "What do you do there?" She hated this part. I own my own—" She cleared her throat. "I'm in advertising." That sounds cool." Then his face fell in thoughtfulness as he realized where she was headed with her original statement. "You own your own business?" Slowly she nodded, knowing she should look more proud of that fact than she seemed. "Me and 3 employees." She shook her head at that statement. "What?" he asked, zeroing in on her with his gaze, making her brain feel like a jammed intersection. She shook her head. "I don't know. Sometimes I think they are more trouble than they're worth." "Why's that?" "Because I just wish I could do it all on my own. Then things would get done right the first time, and I wouldn't always be running around after everyone, trying to keep things going and redoing everybody's mistakes." They're not trained for that kind of work?" "Oh, they're trained all right, but that doesn't always mean much." He seemed to relax a little. "So what do you come up with? Ads?" "We're supposed to do it all, but we have to farm the TV and radio production out. I don't have time for that. But I draw up a bunch of the stuff we use." "Like what?" There's that billboard over on the East X freeway for zebra carpets. That's mine." "The one with all the stripes in the background that has a zebra in the middle if you look real hard?" Her surprise jumped out. "You've seen it?" He laughed. "Yeah, I drove by that thing like 600 times before I ever saw the dang zebra, and now every time I go by I can't believe I missed it." "Well, it's kind of hard to see when you're going 70. "Unless it's 5 and you're going 2, he said with another laugh. It was a nice laugh, hearty but not booming. "True." She matched his laugh, then shrugged. "Sometimes I wish I could do the stuff I like to do and let somebody else do all the rest." "Then why own your own agency? Why not just get on with someone else?" She felt her face corkscrew. "That'd never work." "Why not?" "Because I'm too much of a solo player. Teams just hold you back." The softness of his gaze drifted across her face, and she felt the surface of it go hot. Sometimes it's teamwork that makes life interesting. At that moment, Haley slid into the booth beside Lisa and bumped into her shoulder. It was quite clear that her sister was having a very good time. "Man, that Ramsey guy is insane! I think my legs are going to fall off." "That's not good," Lisa said, turning her attention to her sister. "Corey might shoot me if I let something happen to you." Haley waved her off and looked over to Jeff with a sarcastic shake of her head. "Overprotective maid of honor." He smiled at Haley and then trained his gaze back on Lisa. Trying to think of something to do so her head wouldn't spontaneously combust, she looked at her watch. It was nearly 1. "What time are we planning on leaving anyway? It's getting kind of late." "Late?" Haley asked in horror. "It's early." "Not when you've got work tomorrow, it isn't." "Work? Come on, Lise. Is that all you ever think about?" "Well, I'm supposed to pitch that proposal for the Youth Leadership Conference on Monday, and it's not—" Haley put both hands in the air and waved at Lisa to get her to stop. No, I don't want to hear it. You know what? I want to dance some more." And with that, she slipped back out of the booth. "But you're my—" Lisa started, although Haley was already 6 deep into the crowd. "Ride." She sighed and shook her head. Nobody understood. "Looks like you're stranded," Jeff said, and absurdly, there was an apology in his tone. Lisa growled in frustration. "Yeah, looks that way." His fingers played with the fraying edge of the paper on his beer bottle. "Well, if you need a ride, I wouldn't mind." "Oh, no," she said quickly. "That's okay. I'll just stay until they're ready. It's fine." He nodded. "Oh, okay, of course." Through the crowd, Lisa caught sight of Dustin and Eve in a head-to-head, gazes-locked dance on the smoky fringes of the dance floor. "Looks like your friends are having a good time." He followed her gaze and smiled. "Yeah, those two are always having fun when they're together." "And they're married?" 8 months, he confirmed. "Ah, newlyweds." "In every sense of the word." He laughed. "You think they're bad now? You should have seen them that first month. You'd have thought they were joined at the hip." "They seem like they're really in love." "Yeah, Eve's great, but she always looks a little incomplete without him by her side." Jeff's whole countenance softened as the thoughts behind his eyes floated away on the wings of a dream. "She comes to the station on her lunch break just so they can be together." He shook his head slowly. "And Dustin's always ready to just get done so he can get back home to her. It's like they are determined to spend every single second they possibly can together." Lisa heard the wistfulness in his voice, and she turned her head from the dance floor and laid it on her hand to look at him. "What about you?" Instantly, he looked at her as though he hadn't realized he was having a conversation with anyone other than himself. "What about me?" "You got somebody special in your life? Anyone coming to see you at the fire station?" "My mom came once. Does that count?" She laughed. "It's better than nothing." "Yeah," he said, joining her laugh. "I guess so." Then the smile fell. "It's hard sometimes going out with them. Craig and Bridget are just such a couple. And Dustin and Eve, well..." One of his hands slid down under the table as he straightened from sitting too long in the booth, and he stretched out his jeans. "Ramsey's always got a dozen dates swirling around him, so I get to sit and hold down the table a lot." "Oh," she said, nodding. "So that's what you were doing?" "Yeah." His eyes were a mixture of hesitation and thoughtfulness. "Well, you do a good job of it," she said teasingly, and he looked at her with a question in his eyes. "I mean, look at it." She laid her hands on the tabletop. "It hasn't moved a single inch all night." The hesitation was gone when he smiled at her as she examined the table from top to bottom. "Nope, not a single inch." "Yeah, well, I've had good help," he said, and his voice faded with the words. "Oh, you think so, huh?" Well, then it's a good thing they brought us along, or this here table might have just floated right away. Amusement danced through his eyes. So you've got a presentation Monday? She said as the lightheartedness collapsed around her. The Youth Leadership Conference. Don't remind me. That bad? They're wanting to do this whole speaker thing and get all the schools in Houston in on it. Sounds great, he said, turning as he laid a casual arm over the booth back, looking much more at ease than he had since she'd first touched his arm 2 hours before. What kind of speakers are they going to have? Oh, community leaders, business people, that kind of thing. We're really at the very beginning stages of planning it. It's not supposed to be until the fall, but they want to get going on it now. I'm supposed to have suggestions for speaker names for the meeting on Monday, but at the rate I'm going, I'll be lucky to have them by the time the conference starts. The speakers? Yeah, a long list of Houston's most influential business people, the real top dogs, It's just that I've got this dumb Camden Foods account to worry about because Kurt and Joel can't put a progress report together to save their lives, and we really need to be working on the new campaign for zebra carpets. Once everyone sees the zebra, that one's kind of pointless. She laughed at her own joke, although he didn't seem to catch it. Man, you must be going in circles. That's what it feels like. She closed her eyes and sighed. And then I've got Haley's wedding next weekend, so we've got final fittings this week, and she wants me to go shopping with her for her honeymoon stuff, and then the rehearsal and setting up, and I don't really know when I'm going to find time to do all of this. Like she ran into a solid brick wall, she stopped and surveyed him seriously. You don't know of a way to get more than 24 hours into a day, do you? At the rate you're going, you may need 75. The laugh that came from her soul felt very good. You've got a point. Movement at the front of the table pulled their gazes over to where Dustin and Eve stood arm in arm. Hey, man, I think we're going to call it a night, Dustin said, and Jeff jerked his arm off the back of the booth. So soon? Yeah, we've got to get our stuff boxed up tomorrow. The moving van's going to be there bright and early Monday morning. Oh, you needing some help? Jeff asked, as if he might need to go right then to start boxing things up. Dustin grinned. Hey, I never turned down a good offer of help. What time? 10, 11? Dustin looked at Lisa. Whatever time you can get there. Let's say 11, Jeff said, and Dustin nodded as he extended his hand, and the two of them knocked fists together. See you then. Take care. Dustin stepped away from the table and then turned back. It was nice to meet you, Lisa. Yeah, she said, as embarrassment crowded on her. You too. Night, Dustin said with a final wave. When they were gone, Lisa looked at her watch. 2:00. She shook her head. Good. Now they have to go home. Jeff nodded as he laid his forearms on the table, watching his thumbs bounce back and forth across each other. So you might get some sleep tonight after all. At that moment, the three girls and Ramsey approached the table, and Jeff and Lisa looked up and straightened. Come on, Lise, we're going over to Shane's, Haley said, never really breaking rhythm. You ready? Shane's? Who's Shane? Lisa asked as confusion tinged the anger. Who's Shane? Haley mocked. Shane's the bar, dummy. Bar? Lisa asked in outright dismay. But Ramsey says it's excellent, Bryn said, looking up at him in awe. But I'm not. Lisa looked at her watch. I really need to get home. The set of Haley's hands on her hips said that Lisa was once again ruining her good time. So what, you just want to bust up the whole party then? Come on, Lise, it's not that late. I could take her, Jeff said from Lisa's side, and Haley shifted her attention to him in the same second that Lisa turned her gaze to him. He shrugged as he looked at her. I could take you. No big deal. Cool, Haley said, accepting for Lisa without so much as consulting her, and instantly Lisa turned and nailed Haley with a "would you shut up" gaze. Haley returned the look with one that said, What? I want to go. Lisa turned back to Jeff. I'd hate to put you out. It's not putting me out. I was headed home anyway. Great, so it's settled then, Haley said, smiling. Great, Lisa breathed, wondering when she had stumbled into this nightmare. At the club door, Jeff grabbed his jacket and half followed, half led Lisa outside. She was as stunning standing up as she was sitting right next to him. With her in that business suit, the slim curve of her waist and the heels, his already scrambling brainwaves were having a hard time keeping up with anything other than her. It felt like walking next to a runway model. As they exited, he swung his denim and brown suede jacket on, sensing how underdressed he looked next to her. So, where's your car? He asked, hoping his voice would hold out long enough to get the sentence out. At the office, she said, and he noticed the protective fold of her arms across her chest. On Travis? She looked over at him, and surprise ran through her eyes. Yeah. In slow lockstep, they walked to his car, the product of 100 million hours spent under a hood and on a hard concrete floor, a 1971 black-on-blue Pontiac GTO convertible. Nice, she breathed, running a hand over the shiny paint job when he led her to the passenger side. You think so? He asked, surprised she had even noticed, and even more surprised she didn't turn up her nose at the thought of riding in anything other than the very newest model. He watched her fold herself onto the off-gray seat, not wholly sure if he should take her hand to help her in, or if that was just something he'd seen in some old movie. It wasn't like he'd had much practice at this, and suddenly he really wished he had. Careful to make sure that she was securely in, he waited one more second and then slammed the door. When he slipped behind the steering wheel, she was still marveling. This is unbelievable. Did you do this yourself? She asked in awe. Me and my dad, he said, not really sure if it was her reaction or the pride he had felt when they had finally finished the project that was filling his chest. Her smile lit the night around him. So, is this like a hobby then? He started the car as his heart raced ahead of him. Somehow, even sitting next to her in the noisy bar hadn't been this intimidating. I don't really have the funds for it to be an ongoing hobby, if that's what you mean. But if you did? I love cars. He glanced over at her and then thought better of that move. Ever since I was like 12, my dad and I would go to all the car shows, classics, muscle cars, concept cars. It was just a trip to see anything with a motor. The lights winked across the windshield as they drove down the neon-lit street. So, why this one? She asked. Well, for one thing, it wasn't in perfect condition, so we got it pretty cheap. It really needed a lot of work, but that was cool too, because we got to go all around searching for ones like it to trade out parts. That was half the fun. And what was the other half? He laughed, driving it once it was finished. She glanced down at the gearshift and wrinkled her nose. I don't know, I'm more of an automatic girl myself. It's not so bad. Expertly he shifted down, once you get used to it anyway. She looked up at the ceiling. So, does the top really go back? Yep, it really does, although I don't do that much anymore. I just about ruined it a few years back. I was at school and left it down. About halfway through a statistics test, it started pouring rain. After that, I left it up, just in case. Her hand glided across the door handle. Smart. For an instant, when he looked over at her, he wished they could simply drive forever. That would be so much easier than finding the words to get enough information so he could see her again. The question of her phone number slipped into his mind as his hand shifted the gears, but he didn't have a paper or a pen. More than that, he didn't have the words to ask. Okay, I guess you're going to have to give me a little better coordinates than just Travis Street. Oh, sorry, she said as her gaze snapped from the car to the street. Yeah, turn right up here at the light. The shimmer of her red fingernail sparkled in the flash of the streetlight over the windshield. It's the third building on the right. There's a parking garage next to it. Okay. He downshifted again and then spun the wheel to guide them into the darkened parking area. "I'm on the 3rd level." She settled back into the seat, and when he glanced over at her, he liked how comfortable she looked. At that moment, her gaze chanced across to his, and his heart thudded to a stop. If only there were words. "3rd level, right?" he asked softly. "Right." Her gaze jumped from his to her window, and reluctantly he turned the car up the 2nd ramp and into the 3rd level. "It's over there, the white Cavalier." It wasn't hard to spot. There were only a few vehicles left on the whole level. Deftly, he spun into a space 2 over from where her car sat overlooking the street below. Once parked, his brain scrambled for what to do next. The previous minutes had all been so easy, but now what to do or what to say evaporated from around him. Something told him to shut the car off because its noise was reverberating across the concrete. However, the second the car died, the silence around them echoed far louder. "Well," he said without looking at her, "this is it." "I guess so," she said, but she didn't move to get out of the car. Suddenly, his brain said, "You idiot, she's waiting for you to open her door." Not nearly as smoothly as he would have liked, he got out and ran around the back to her side where he reached for the handle. One click, and she smiled up at him as she slipped out and waited for him to close the door. His senses didn't miss the red fingernail and the slim finger attached to it as together they pushed the edge of her hair behind her ear. She smiled at him again, but nervous now. "Well, thanks." "No problem." Lest he do what his body was screaming at him to do and reach out and touch her, he jammed his hands into his jacket pockets. After a moment, she looked over at her car and then turned for it, and although it was only a 10-step walk, he followed her, trying to find some way to make this moment last longer than any one had ever lasted before. "Thanks for helping me hold the table down." At the door of her car, she turned, and her smile no longer held apprehension. "Thanks for keeping me sane." "My pleasure." The muted noise of the cars on the street below was the only sound as they stood there, neither really looking at the other. Finally, she wound her hair around her ear again as it had somehow become dislodged in the adventure of getting from his car to hers. "I'd better be getting home." One hand produced her keys from some undisclosed place under her suit jacket. She turned, unlocked the door, pulled it open, and then she turned back to him for one more glance. "Take care, okay? And good luck." With that, she slipped into the car as he held the door. "Say something," his brain screamed. "Night." "Not that!" He couldn't even get a real smile on his face as he shut her door. Helpless to get what should have been so easy to say said, he stood there and watched as she started the car. One small step at a time, he backed away, and then with one little wave, she backed out and drove away. At that moment, every mistake he had ever made paled in comparison to that one. The air jammed into the top of Lisa's throat as she guided the little car to the other end of the parking garage to the down ramp. Don't look back, just don't look back. But her heart wanted one more glimpse, and defiantly it swung her gaze up to the mirror. In it, he still stood there in that jacket that made her skin burn like flames as he watched her drive away. "Go back," her heart begged. "Please, we'll never find him again." With a force that felt like it was ripping her soul in half, she refocused her gaze from the mirror to the concrete in front of her. Guys were all the same. It was the way they were wired, nice looking on the outside and total jerks on the inside. Sure, he hadn't tried to maul her like most of them did, but that was only a matter of time, and if she had the resolve to simply drive away, the amount of time he had to disappoint her would vanish just like he would from her mirror. As she turned first one corner and then the next, it all seemed so easy. Just leave him behind and he would be gone. However, long after she was home and in bed, the will to deny that that last glance was destined to stay with her forever vanished as well. He would be in her heart forever, and she knew in every part of her that the what-ifs dogging her mind would never really fade away. This has been To Protect and Serve, Volume 1 of the Courage series. Written by Staci Stallings, narrated by Becky Dowdy. Copyright 2012 by Staci Stallings. Production copyright 2014 by Staci Stallings. This has been a Braveheart Audiobooks production.
What's coming next? Find out. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel and never miss a second of the story.